Have you ever stood outside on a snowy day and wondered, how does snow form? It's actually a fascinating process, and while it might sound a bit complicated, it's not too hard to understand. Snow happens when the weather gets cold enough to change water into ice, and it all starts in the clouds up in the sky. Let's take a closer look at how snow is made, step by step. Snow doesn't just appear out of nowhere. It all begins with water that is already in the air. You might not realize it, but there's always some amount of water vapor, gas form of water, floating around us in the atmosphere. It's the same water that can make clouds, fog, or even cause rain when the conditions are right. Now, for snow to form, the air has to be cold enough, typically below freezing, which is 32 degrees Fahrenheit or 0 degrees Celsius. When the temperature drops to this point, the water vapor in the air begins to change. Instead of staying as a gas, it starts to freeze into tiny ice crystals. This is similar to how frost forms on a cold window in the winter. The water vapor attaches to tiny particles in the air, like dust or pollen, and begins to freeze. This process is called condensation. As the water vapor freezes, it forms small ice crystals. These ice crystals are the building blocks of snowflakes. Snowflakes are actually made up of many tiny ice crystals that join together. What's interesting is that these crystals always form in a hexagonal, six-sided shape. This happens because of the way the molecules of water are arranged when they freeze. It's this unique structure that gives each snowflake its distinct, beautiful shape. Even though snowflakes are all made of the same basic ice crystals, no two snowflakes are exactly alike. This is because the conditions in the clouds, like temperature and moisture, can change, causing each snowflake to grow in its own way. Some snowflakes might have sharp edges, while others might look more rounded or delicate. As the tiny ice crystals fall through the sky, they can pick up more water vapor. When the water vapor in the air freezes onto the crystals, they grow larger. This is why snowflakes can get bigger as they fall toward the ground. Depending on how much moisture is in the air and how cold it is, the snowflakes might be tiny and light, or they could be large and fluffy. For example, when the air is very cold, the snowflakes might be small and powdery, while in warmer conditions, but still below freezing, they might be bigger and stick together more easily. This difference is why you might notice that snowflakes can sometimes be light and fluffy or wet and heavy, depending on the weather. Once the snowflakes have gathered enough ice crystals and become heavy enough, they begin to fall to the ground. The force of gravity pulls them downward, and that's when we see the beautiful snowfall. As they fall, the snowflakes can sometimes bump into each other and stick together, forming even bigger clusters of snowflakes. That's why sometimes we see larger flakes falling in groups, creating that soft, thick blanket of snow on the ground. For snow to actually accumulate on the ground itself has to be cold enough too. If the ground is warm, like it might be in early winter or spring, the snowflakes could melt before they hit the ground. This is why sometimes it snows for a little while but the snow doesn't stick, or why you might see snow turning to slush on the roads. If the temperature is right, the snowflakes will settle on the ground and start to pile up, creating a snowy landscape. Ever notice how snow feels so soft and fluffy when you touch it? That's because snowflakes are made up of many tiny ice crystals, and these crystals are full of air. The spaces between the crystals trap air, which makes snow feel light and soft. When snow falls in large amounts, this air gets trapped between the snowflakes, making a fluffy, powdery blanket on the ground. Snow mostly happens in winter because that's when temperatures are cold enough for water to freeze into ice crystals. In many parts of the world, the temperatures drop low enough during the colder months for snow to form. However, in some areas, snow can even happen in the spring or fall if the temperatures dip low enough at the right time. So, to sum it up, snow starts with water vapor in the air. When the air is cold enough, the water vapor freezes into tiny ice crystals, which form snowflakes. As they fall from the clouds, they can pick up more ice, grow larger, and eventually reach the ground. If the conditions are just right, we get a blanket of snow covering everything, turning the world into a winter wonderland. The next time it's snowing, just remember that all this magic starts in the clouds, with a little water, some cold air, and a lot of beautiful ice crystals coming together to create the snowflakes that fall from the sky.